Today we're going to turn our attention to 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 9. One of the questions I sometimes get from people in person or via email is asking if I think we're living in the end times or the last days before Jesus returns. And a couple things about that. One, that's a question that Christians in every generation have asked. And people have looked at wars or famines or natural disasters or things that were happening and tried to connect the dots and said, boy, I really think this is it. That's happened in every generation for almost 2,000 years. And Christ hasn't returned yet. So we need to be sober about not being too sure of what we think is happening. At the same time, Paul describes the godlessness that's going to come in the last days. And when we hear descriptions like he gives us in 2 Timothy 3, 1 to 9, you understand why some people wonder, are we getting closer because of what we see? The verse for the day is chapter 3, verse 1. You must understand this, that in the last days, distressing times will come. And listen to some of the behaviors, I'm going to read some of the passage for you, that Paul says will be present. For people will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, inhuman, implacable, slanderers, profligates, brutes, haters of good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. Well, when you hear all those behaviors that are descriptions of the godlessness that will be seen in the last days, for some of you, that may cause you to think about a particular individual or a person. For other people, it may cause you to think about trends that you're seeing in the larger society. One of the things that our son Greg mentioned in his sermon on Sunday of this week was going to a county fair in Pennsylvania with his wife Marcy, and just the terrible language they saw on people's shirts and hats, which is an example of kind of the abusive, disrespectful, haters of good, all these sorts of things. So when you read a passage like 2 Timothy 3, you can understand why there are those who wonder, are we in the last days? Because a lot of the terrible behavior that Paul describes, we certainly are seeing around us and in our culture. Christians are called to be countercultural people. We are to live and act and speak in a way that honors God, that glorifies Christ, that demonstrates Christian virtue, even if the whole rest of the culture is going in a different direction. When I was a young pastor, I had a t-shirt that had Romans 12, 1 to 2 at the top, about letting ourselves be a living sacrifice to God, letting that be our spiritual worship. And there was a rectangular picture on that shirt, and it was a whole bunch of fish, some of them nasty with big teeth and everything, all going in this direction. And there was one solitary Christian fish swimming against the tide. That's what you and I are called to do, even in the godlessness and what could be the beginning of the end times. We're called to follow the way of Christ.